Millionaire ignored his pregnant wife's cries. The mistress was his only priority. From the outside, Mark Henderson appeared to have it all: a booming real estate empire, a sprawling mansion nestled in the outskirts of Los Angeles, and a poised, loving wife expecting their first child. Neighbors whispered in admiration about how quickly Mark's star had risen, yet behind closed doors, a storm brewed. Hannah's silent tears were overshadowed by Mark's obsession with his mistress's lavish demands. The tension in the Henderson household simmered like a kettle about to explode. Today, we delve into a gripping, real-life drama where wealth collides with betrayal and one woman's cry for help is brutally ignored. Mark Henderson's journey from a humble upbringing in San Diego to the pinnacle of Los Angeles' elite was nothing short of remarkable. Born to a single mother, Darlene Henderson, he spent most of his childhood in a cramped apartment that overlooked a noisy freeway. He often watched sports cars whiz by, daydreaming about the life he wished he could live. Yet Mark's ambitions were bigger than the squealing brakes and dusty windows that clouded his early years. Every morning, he rose before the sun to deliver newspapers and save every penny. By night, he devoured books on entrepreneurship and real estate. In high school, Mark befriended a bright, imaginative girl named Hannah Morgan. Though she hailed from a slightly more stable home environment, Hannah felt a deep connection to Mark's determination. Their bond formed slowly through late-night phone calls where they exchanged life stories and grand ambitions. She saw in him a fire so intense it both intrigued and intimidated her. He saw in her a steady source of warmth, a calm in his own swirling storm of ambition. Yet, despite their close friendship, they never quite crossed the line into romance during those teenage years. After high school, Mark attended a local community college, juggling multiple part-time jobs to fund his education. Hannah, on the other hand, pursued a degree in journalism at a state university. Their paths diverged but never fully separated. They kept in touch through sporadic emails and phone calls, updating each other on life's developments, her budding interest in investigative reporting, his fascination with flipping rundown properties and renting them out for profit. It was in his final year of college that Mark stumbled upon what would become his lifelong obsession: real estate investment. He interned with a small firm run by a shrewd but kind-hearted broker named Alan Burrows. Under Alan's mentorship, Mark learned the intricacies of property valuation, market trends, and negotiation tactics. Immediately after graduation, Mark set his sights on distressed properties in neighborhoods he believed were on the verge of gentrification. He borrowed money from friends and a few of Alan's acquaintances to make his first purchase, a dilapidated house in East Los Angeles. That first venture brought Mark a modest profit, but more importantly, it validated his instincts. Through grueling hours and endless research, he honed his strategy, scouring the city for hidden gems with potential. With each successful flip, his reputation grew. Investors saw in him an unrelenting drive and an uncanny ability to foresee development hotspots. By the time he turned 28, Mark had amassed a modest portfolio. By 30, he was a millionaire several times over, known in industry circles for his sharp mind, ironclad work ethic, and appetite for risk. During that same period, Hannah built her career in journalism. She worked for a local paper, covering community events and minor political scandals, and soon developed a knack for digging deeper than most. Her curiosity sometimes got her into trouble, but it also won her awards. Despite her success, life felt strangely incomplete. She dated a few men, but none sparked the same sense of fervor she'd felt in Mark's presence. And so, one night, when an unexpected invitation arrived for a gala celebrating local entrepreneurs, She accepted without a second thought. The invitation happened to come from Mark Henderson, who was being honored for his contributions to affordable housing in a low-income neighborhood. At that gala, set in a luxurious hotel ballroom in downtown Los Angeles, their reunion was electric. Mark recognized her instantly, despite the elegant dress and poised demeanor she now carried with confidence. Hannah hardly recognized the suave, tailored suit wearing man shaking hands with city officials and real estate moguls. Their eyes met across the room, and it was as though years of distance melted in a single glance. They found each other after the ceremony, huddling in a quiet corner with glasses of champagne, catching up on all they had missed. They spoke of childhood memories, their separate journeys, and their renewed ambitions. Mark couldn't help but admire Hannah's unwavering sense of justice, her empathy, and her refusal to compromise on integrity in her reporting. Hannah was awed by his maturity and his ability to wield considerable influence without losing the essence of who he was, that tenacious boy from San Diego who delivered newspapers at dawn. One meeting led to another, which led to a late-night coffee date and a long stroll by the Santa Monica Pier. Mark confessed that the path to success was lonely, filled with uncertain partnerships and the ever-looming fear of financial ruin if a deal went wrong. Hannah shared her frustrations with corruption stories being buried by editors too afraid to challenge powerful figures. As they walked under the moonlit sky, the closeness they once felt in high school grew more potent. They connected on a deeper level, no longer as naive teenagers, but as adults who had faced life's complexities and emerged stronger. It did not take long for them to officially become a couple. Their circle of friends whispered that the union of Mark and Hannah felt like destiny. Hannah's parents, Laura and Joseph Morgan, were ecstatic to see their daughter with a man so devoted to his passions, yet so attentive to her every word. Mark's mother, Darlene, though proud of her son's achievements, felt an even greater pride seeing him choose a partner who stood by him with unwavering resolve. Their courtship was short but intense. Mark, ever the grand gesture type, proposed to Hannah at the top of the Griffith Observatory. It was a private moment beneath the stars, the city lights glittering below them as Mark slipped a delicate diamond ring onto her finger. She said yes, tears streaming down her cheeks, and their embrace was a promise of a future built on trust, mutual respect, and a love rooted in shared history. Their wedding took place on a warm summer afternoon in the backyard of a friend's estate in Malibu. It was an intimate affair, attended mostly by close family, longtime friends, and a handful of Mark's business associates. Hannah wore a simple yet elegant gown, carrying a bouquet of white roses that contrasted beautifully with her dark hair. Mark looked every bit the confident groom, but his voice quivered with emotion as he recited his vows. He promised to love and protect Hannah, to value her spirit and her independence, and to be there for her in moments of triumph and despair. For a time, life was beautiful. They settled into a renovated Spanish-style villa in the rolling hills of Los Feliz. Hannah continued her journalism career, while Mark expanded his real estate empire. Their combined schedules were demanding, but they made time for each other, shared breakfasts where they discussed their dreams, quiet evenings watching documentaries, spontaneous weekend getaways to quiet coastal towns. But with success came pressure. As Mark's wealth ballooned, he found himself juggling an ever-growing list of clients, partners, and high-stake deals. Every morning seemed to arrive with an urgent phone call from an investor demanding progress updates. Every evening brought a new networking event. Hannah, committed to ethical reporting, ran into challenges at work whenever her stories stepped on the toes of influential individuals. Despite their busy lives, they remained each other's anchors, or so Hannah believed. Then came the news that would change everything. Hannah was pregnant. She had discovered it on a random Tuesday afternoon after feeling unusually nauseous. A test confirmed it, and she rushed to Mark's office with trembling excitement. Mark's reaction was as elated as she'd dreamed. He lifted her off her feet in a swirl of genuine joy. That evening, they celebrated privately with a homemade dinner and a promise to raise their child in a household brimming with love. But life has a strange way of twisting joy into sorrow when hidden cracks begin to widen. The cracks in Mark's life were subtle at first. Missed dinners, a vague restlessness in his eyes, business trips that seemed more frequent than ever. Hannah tried to be understanding. His career was intense, and she believed that his dedication provided them with a comfortable life. Yet, a small seed of doubt took root in her mind when she found a lipstick-stained handkerchief in his jacket pocket. It was not hers. She tried confronting him gently, but Mark dismissed it with a laugh, attributing it to an overly friendly client who had hugged him at a charity event. He had forgotten to get it cleaned, he claimed, offering a quick apology before rushing to another meeting. Still, Hannah felt uneasy. She knew Mark's ambitious nature was part of what made him who he was, but she also sensed a shift. He was more guarded with his phone, more prone to irritability, and sometimes she caught a hint of perfume on his suits that smelled nothing like her own. When Hannah was about 4 months along, she began noticing explicit changes in Mark's schedule. Late-night phone calls, abrupt outings he refused to explain, and an unsettling coldness that settled between them. At first, Hannah blamed pregnancy hormones for her heightened sensitivity, but deep down, she suspected there was more at play. Her suspicions were confirmed one afternoon when Mark left for a business meeting and inadvertently forgot his phone in the car. It buzzed incessantly, flashing messages from a contact labeled only with the initials LS. Hannah's heart pounded as she read the words displayed on the lock screen. "Missing you already. Can't wait to see you again tonight." Though Mark had never given her his passcode, the message alone was enough to shatter her remaining illusions. Stricken with disbelief, Hannah wrestled with whether to confront him directly. She knew Mark was proud, prone to denial if cornered without incontrovertible evidence. Perhaps the best approach was to follow her journalistic instincts, gather facts, confirm them, and then decide how to act. But this was her marriage, her unborn child's father. Could she risk an open confrontation based on a single text? In the weeks that followed, Hannah became a detective in her own home. She noted Mark's comings and goings, the phone calls he received, the changes in his demeanor. Each new clue drove a deeper wedge of pain into her heart, but she kept her suspicions hidden behind forced smiles and polite conversation. She feared that if she confronted him without ironclad proof, it might destroy the fragile balance they still maintained. Her fears were not unfounded. Mark was indeed entangled in an affair. Late-night trysts at luxury hotels, secret dinners at candlelit restaurants where he assumed no one would recognize him, these became the new routine for a man once defined by loyalty and grit. The mistress in question was a woman named Lillian Stewart, a striking former model with connections to Hollywood's elite. Lillian had her own ambitions, launching a high-end fashion line, and she saw in Mark both a romantic partner and a financial patron who could help her achieve her dreams. Mark, seduced by her allure and perhaps by the novelty of a life that was free from the emotional weights of domestic life, found himself falling deeper into Lillian's web. Meanwhile, Hannah navigated her pregnancy with an ever-present ache in her chest. She'd smile when her mother called, offering updates on nursery preparations and baby name ideas. She'd put on a brave face at her obstetrician visits, feigning normalcy as the doctor showed her the baby's healthy heartbeat on the ultrasound. But inside, her suspicions thrummed like a constant drumbeat. Each lie Mark told, each elusive phone call, was another blow to the marriage she cherished. As the weeks turned into months, the tension became too thick to ignore. Hannah knew she needed definitive proof before she confronted Mark. She employed the help of a private investigator, a discreet man named Peter Caldwell, someone she'd met once while researching a corruption story. Peter was reluctant at first, wary of personal entanglements, but Hannah's desperation along with a substantial fee convinced him to take the case. Peter set to work, trailing Mark discreetly for several weeks. Photographs emerged, Mark exiting an upscale boutique in Beverly Hills with Lillian on his arm, sharing a private laugh. Mark's car parked outside Lillian's high-rise condo, not just once, but multiple times. Receipts for expensive gifts, dinners, and spa appointments made out to Lillian. Hannah spent many sleepless nights poring over Peter's reports, her tears staining the printed pages. Each piece of evidence felt like a stab, not just to her heart, but to the dream of a stable family she had so dearly wanted for her child. And yet, every time Hannah thought about confronting Mark, her resolve wavered. She was 6 months pregnant now, her belly round with the promise of new life. She still remembered their wedding vows, the nights they laughed and made plans for the future. The sweet way he once caressed her hair when she fell ill. Was that all gone? Reduced to ashes by the spark of infidelity, the day Hannah decided to confront Mark was the day she found out the sex of their baby, a little boy. She had gone to the doctor alone, as Mark claimed to be tied up in urgent meetings. Looking at the ultrasound, she felt both exhilaration and a profound sadness. That night, while waiting for Mark to come home, she laid out the photographs on their dining room table. She rehearsed her speech in her mind, bracing herself for his reaction, for the inevitable unraveling of their life together. But Mark never showed up. The hours passed, the food she prepared grew cold, and her phone calls went straight to voicemail. It was nearly midnight when Mark finally stepped through the door. He looked exhausted, and though he tried to hide it, the lingering scent of another woman's perfume clung to his clothes. Hannah's eyes burned with tears, but she remained calm. "Sit down," she said, her voice trembling only slightly. Mark glanced at the array of photographs spread before him. A flicker of panic crossed his face. For a moment, Hannah hoped he might break down, offer a tearful confession, beg for forgiveness. Instead, he looked away, jaw set in defiance. "Where did you get these?" he asked coldly, ignoring the raw betrayal in her eyes. "Does it matter?" she replied, her voice strangled by heartbreak. "I know everything, Mark. I know about Lillian Stewart. I know about the late nights, the trips, the gifts. You can't lie to me anymore." Silence settled between them, heavy as a concrete wall. Finally, Mark spoke. "It's not what it looks like," he began, but even he seemed unsure of his own words. Hannah waited, but he offered no better explanation. "How could you do this? I'm your wife. We're having a child, a son." Her voice cracked, tears welling up. "I trusted you. I believed in us." Mark sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands for a moment before looking up at her. "I never meant for this to happen," he whispered, voice thick with something that could have been remorse or simply exhaustion. "Lillian and I. It was just a distraction. I'm under so much pressure. Hannah, this new development deal is worth millions, and investors keep pushing." I felt like I was suffocating. I needed an escape. Hannah's anger flared, momentarily eclipsing her sorrow. "So you escaped by cheating? You betrayed everything we built, Mark. Our marriage, our family, our dreams. You think that's an excuse?" He stood, attempting to move closer to her, but she recoiled. "Don't," she hissed. "Don't touch me. Not after what you've done." His features hardened, perhaps a defense against her rejection. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he repeated, this time with more agitation. And you're always buried in your work, investigating this or that. We barely even talk anymore." Hannah felt her heart break anew. "So that justifies an affair? I'm pregnant with your child, Mark. I've been shouldering the changes in my body, the emotional turmoil, trying to keep our lives intact while you're off with another woman." Mark stared at her, guilt and frustration warring in his expression. He tried to form words, but none came. Eventually he grabbed his jacket and phone, muttering something about needing space. Hannah stood alone in the living room, tears streaming down her cheeks as the door slammed shut. That night, she cried herself to sleep, alone for the first time in their marriage. The house felt haunted by his absence, every hallway echoing with memories of happier times. She knew that the confrontation was only the beginning of a crisis that threatened to consume them both. If Hannah thought the worst had passed, she was mistaken. Mark's affair would soon escalate into a full-blown scandal, one that would shake not just their marriage but his entire empire, putting everything and everyone they cared about at risk. The morning after their confrontation, Hannah awoke to an empty bed and an eerily quiet house. She was no stranger to Mark's occasional overnight absences. He often traveled for deals or claimed to crash at his office when negotiations ran late, but this time, the silence felt unbearably heavy. When she finally mustered the courage to check her phone, there was no message from him. The loneliness pressed on her chest like a lead weight. She spent the day in a haze, mechanically going through the motions of daily life, making breakfast, attempting to read the latest investigative pieces from her colleagues, folding tiny baby clothes she had recently purchased. Everything reminded her of the child growing inside her, the child who would soon enter a household in shambles if things didn't change. Late afternoon brought a surprise visitor. Darlene, Mark's mother, showed up at the door with a casserole dish and a worried expression. "I got the sense something was wrong," Darlene explained softly. "Mark called me, said he needed some space." "That's not like him. Where is he?" Hannah's composure cracked, and the tears she'd been holding back came rushing forth. She motioned for Darlene to come inside, then told her the whole story, the affair, the nights alone, the photographs, Mark's pitiful excuses. Throughout her tale, Darlene remained silent, her eyes filled with both sorrow and anger. When Hannah finished, Darlene placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I'm so sorry you're going through this," she said gently. "I never imagined my son would do something so reckless, especially now." Hannah nodded, struggling to steady her breath. She appreciated Darlene's empathy, but she couldn't ignore the bitter reality. Mark had betrayed her trust. No casserole dish or comforting words could erase that. Still, she let Darlene's presence soothe her. They talked for hours, discussing possible ways to reach Mark, to convince him to come home and face the consequences of his actions. Darlene offered to call him, but Hannah declined. "He'll only see it as meddling," she said. "I need him to come back on his own terms." Ready to talk. That night, Hannah tried once more to call Mark, but again it went straight to voicemail. Exhausted, she retreated to bed. She tossed and turned, her mind spiraling with dark thoughts. Had he chosen Lillian over her for good? Would she end up raising this child alone? Meanwhile, Mark was indeed with Lillian, holed up in a penthouse suite in downtown Los Angeles. The suite boasted floor-to-ceiling windows, offering panoramic views of the city, a city that Mark had once navigated with youthful determination, now a glittering testament to his financial success. But despite the lavish setting, Mark felt restless, even anxious. Lillian lounged on the plush couch, flipping through a magazine filled with designer dresses, occasionally showing him a piece she liked. "You think I could pull this off for my line's launch party?" she asked, her tone light, almost dismissive of the emotional turmoil Mark was steeped in. He forced a half smile. "Sure, it looks great," he said, though he couldn't muster any real enthusiasm. His mind was consumed with the image of Hannah's tear-filled eyes, the pain etched across her face, and the photographs that laid bare his betrayal. Guilt knotted his stomach. "Mark," Lillian said, noticing his distraction, "I need you present. You're barely here." "Is this about that phone call from your mother?" he sighed, rubbing his temples. "It's about everything," he admitted. "I messed up, Lillian. The first know that. Hannah's pregnant 6 months now, and I've all but deserted her." She set the magazine aside and moved closer, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "You're too hard on yourself," she whispered, leaning in. "We have something special. I'm not asking you to abandon your responsibilities, but you can't keep torturing yourself like this. Maybe it's best you finalize things with Hannah. You have your life, and I have mine, but we can create something together." His jaw clenched. Deep down, Mark knew that every minute he spent in Lillian's company was a minute further from redemption with Hannah. Yet he felt entangled, drawn in by Lillian's worldliness, her understanding of the pressures that came with high-stakes business. Or at least, she claimed to understand. Hannah represented home, comfort, and conscience, while Lillian offered escape, excitement, and a sense of reckless freedom he hadn't felt in years. The duality tore him apart. In the days that followed, Mark dove headfirst into his work as though to drown out the chaos of his personal life. Meetings, conference calls, business lunches, he welcomed each distraction. He couldn't bear to face Hannah, nor could he bring himself to cut ties with Lillian. Instead, he vacillated between guilt and denial, telling himself he would figure it all out once the pressure from his pending development deal eased. The deal in question was massive, a sprawling complex of luxury condominiums near the revitalized downtown area. Investors from New York and Dubai had poured millions into the project. The city's planning commission was watching closely, as were local activists concerned about the displacement of lower-income residents. Mark found himself in the crosshairs of both corporate allies and social critics, a precarious position that he felt required his undivided attention. Yet, ironically, he was anything but fully focused. His mind constantly drifted to the personal storm he had created. Hannah, on the other hand, found herself growing more determined each day. She realized that her silence only enabled Mark's avoidance. So she decided to investigate the final piece of the puzzle, the nature of Lillian's relationship with Mark beyond mere physical attraction. What did Lillian stand to gain financially? Was she simply a woman who had fallen for a married man, or did she have ulterior motives? Using her journalistic savvy, Hannah dug into Lillian's background. She discovered that Lillian had a history of relationships with affluent men. There were rumors of questionable financial transactions, whispers of blackmail, and a string of ex-boyfriends who had quietly paid hefty sums to keep certain details under wraps. Hannah wasn't entirely surprised. Mark had always been a prime target for those seeking wealth or influence. But the extent of Lillian's alleged manipulation made her fear for her husband's business as well as their personal lives. One evening, determined to confront the situation head-on, Hannah drove to the downtown penthouse where Mark had been staying with Lillian. Peter Caldwell, the private investigator, had supplied her with the address. Hannah's heart pounded as she stood outside the imposing glass structure. The doorman asked if she had an appointment. She hesitated only a moment before stating confidently, "I'm Mark Henderson's wife. He's expecting me." The doorman, clearly familiar with Mark, stepped aside without further questions. She rode the elevator up to the 52nd floor, each ding of the doors amplifying her anxiety. When she reached the penthouse, she found the door slightly ajar. Stepping inside, she heard raised voices from the next room. "Damn it, Lillian," Mark's voice thundered. "I said I'd handle it. Why are you pushing me like this?" Hannah's heart lurched at the raw frustration in his tone. She carefully moved closer, peeking around the corner. Lillian stood by a floor-to-ceiling window, arms crossed, her posture rigid. I'm pushing you because I've invested my own money in this, Mark. I'm launching my line in just a month, and your support is crucial. Without you, I can't secure the partnerships I need. Mark raked a hand through his hair. I told you I'd invest. What more do you want? She turned, fire in her eyes. I want you to invest in me the way you invest in your deals. No half measures. And I want you to break it off with Hannah once and for all. I'm tired of hiding. The conversation stunned Hannah, who realized that Mark was financially backing Lillian's fashion line. She also realized that Lillian viewed her as an obstacle to be removed. Anger flared, but she forced herself to remain calm. She needed to understand the full extent of what was happening. I'm not discussing Hannah with you right now, Mark said. She's pregnant with my child. This is complicated. It's only complicated because you won't make a decision, Lillian snapped. I can't afford your indecision. You either commit to me or let me move on. And if I move on, I'm taking what you promised with me. Mark's shoulders sagged in exasperation. Why are you threatening me? This was supposed to be a partnership. That partnership hinges on you upholding your end. If you can't, I have no problem finding another investor. But I prefer not to, Lillian said, her tone softer now, almost seductive. She approached Mark, resting a hand on his shoulder. I want this to work, Mark, but I need to know where we stand. Hannah couldn't listen anymore. She stepped fully into the room, her presence a sharp interruption that made both of them whirl around. The shock on Mark's face was immediate. Lillian stiffened, her eyes narrowing as she scanned Hannah's pregnant form. Well, if it isn't the devoted wife, Lillian said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Mark opened his mouth to speak, but words failed him. Hannah felt her hands tremble, her heart pounding, but she steadied herself. I came to speak to my husband, she said, her voice surprisingly resolute. Alone, Lillian scoffed, turning to Mark. Your call, she said. He nodded, still too stunned to form a sentence. As Lillian walked out, she brushed past Hannah, casting a scornful glance at her belly. Once she was gone, Hannah stood facing Mark in the lavishly furnished living area. The city lights twinkled behind him, a stark contrast to the darkness that had crept into their marriage. We need to talk, she said quietly. He nodded, swallowing hard. I know. She drew a shaky breath. Why, Mark? Why her? Why now? I thought we were building a life together. We're having a son. Was all of that meaningless to you? Mark sank onto a nearby sofa, burying his face in his hands. It wasn't meaningless, he murmured. I never wanted to hurt you. I got lost. The business, the stress, everything. Lillian was exciting. She offered me a chance to forget my responsibilities for a while. Hannah felt tears prickle her eyes, but she blinked them back. Forget your responsibilities? That includes me and our baby? Don't you realize how selfish that sounds? He nodded, a tear sliding down his cheek. I know. I've messed up so badly, but it's not just about the affair. Lillian and I invested in her line. It's a significant amount, and it's tied to the success of my development deal. If I pull out now, I'll lose everything I've put in. She might even retaliate, cause problems for my investors. It could ruin me financially. An incredulous laugh escaped Hannah. So this is about money too. You risked our marriage for a questionable business deal. He shook his head. No, I risked our marriage because I was foolish and weak. The money part just makes it all more complicated. Hannah, I'm in too deep. I don't know how to fix this. She wanted to rail at him, to scream and cry and unleash all her pent-up fury. But she also realized that Mark was, in some twisted way, a victim of his own ambition and Lillian's manipulations. That didn't excuse him, but it painted a picture of a man who'd lost his moral compass in the face of overwhelming pressure. Taking a seat across from him, Hannah's voice trembled. What about our child? What happens when he's born? Mark lifted his head, eyes rimmed with regret. I want to be there for him, and for you if you'll let me. I just don't know how to extricate myself from Lillian without unleashing a whole new set of problems. She stared at him, silent for a long moment. Are you prepared to be a father, Mark? Being a father means putting someone else's needs before your own. It means sacrificing, making hard choices. Can you do that? He clenched his jaw, inhaling shakily. I want to try. I want to fix this. But I need time to sort out the financial ramifications, to make sure Lillian doesn't retaliate. Hannah felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. Here she was, 6 months pregnant, standing in a penthouse that reeked of betrayal, listening to her husband talk about how he might salvage their life while protecting his money. She pressed a hand to her belly, feeling a gentle kick, a reminder that a little life depended on her. She stood up, her posture determined. I won't beg you to come home, but if you care about me, about our child, you'll find a way to leave Lillian behind, deal or no deal. Otherwise, don't bother showing up at the hospital when I give birth. Tears pooled in Mark's eyes. Hannah, wait. She held up a hand. I'm done waiting for you, Mark. The clock is ticking. Our son will be here soon, and I refuse to bring him into a world where his father is torn between his wife and his mistress. You have a choice. Be the man I married, or walk away. With that, she turned and walked out, ignoring his pleas for her to come back. The elevator ride down felt endless, her mind a tumult of conflicting emotions. She still loved Mark. She didn't know how to stop, but she also recognized that love alone couldn't mend the chasm he had created. Over the next week, Mark tried calling Hannah multiple times a day. Initially, she didn't answer, needing space to process everything. When she finally did pick up, she found him contrite, apologizing profusely, assuring her that he was taking steps to disentangle himself from Lillian. Yet, he couldn't give her a clear timeline, nor could he promise that the fallout wouldn't be severe. He spoke of high-stake negotiations with Lillian's lawyers, and she wondered how it had escalated so quickly. The woman was more than a casual mistress. She was a business partner wielding real power over Mark. During this time, Hannah found solace in unlikely places. She rekindled friendships that had faded amid her busy schedule. She invited her parents to stay with her for a few days, grateful for their unwavering support. Laura Morgan rubbed Hannah's feet and told her stories about the joys and challenges of motherhood, while Joseph Morgan assured her that, no matter what happened with Mark, they would stand by her. Yet the emotional toll took a physical toll as well. Hannah began experiencing elevated blood pressure, and her obstetrician ordered her to rest more. The stress wasn't good for the baby, the doctor warned, and Hannah needed to prioritize her health. One evening, as she lay in bed, her phone pinged with a text message. It was from a number she didn't recognize. The message read, "You think you're so righteous, but Mark isn't the saint you imagine. If you try to take him away from me completely, you'll regret it. L." Fear coursed through her veins. Lillian had her number. Lillian was threatening her, albeit indirectly. Hannah's resolve only hardened. If Mark didn't cut ties with this woman soon, the situation would escalate beyond repair. Meanwhile, Mark found himself fighting battles on multiple fronts. Lillian threatened to sue him for breach of contract if he withdrew his investment. She claimed she'd revealed damaging information to the press, which could scuttle Mark's development deal and tarnish his reputation. Investors caught wind of the turmoil and began to grow skittish. Mark's phone rang off the hook, with anxious partners demanding explanations. Desperate, Mark sought legal advice from a trusted attorney, Robert Calhoun, who had guided him through many of his real estate ventures. Robert was appalled by Mark's tangled personal and financial affairs. "You've given this woman an incredible amount of leverage," Robert said grimly, sifting through documents that outlined the investments. She could do real damage if she goes public. And from the looks of it, she's prepared to. Mark sighed, burying his face in his hands. I just want out. I want to be with my wife, my child, and put this behind me. Robert closed the folder with a soft thud. Then be prepared to negotiate. It might cost you a significant sum. She'll want a buyout. Hush money. Something. Are you willing to pay that price? Mark hesitated. The sum Lillian might demand could put a serious dent in his fortune, not to mention the potential blow to his credibility if investors discovered the scandal behind the scenes. But as he thought of Hannah, her tear-streaked face, her pregnant belly, the love he still felt, he knew he had no other choice. I'll pay whatever I have to, Mark finally said. I can't lose Hannah. Negotiations commenced swiftly. Robert Calhoun reached out to Lillian's legal team, offering a substantial settlement in exchange for her silent withdrawal from both the business partnership and Mark's personal life. Lillian played hardball, demanding an even higher figure, along with Mark's guarantee that he wouldn't sabotage her fledgling fashion line. Days turned into nights of tense back and forth. Meanwhile, Hannah remained cautious, refusing to meet Mark in person until he assured her the deal was in motion. At times, she questioned whether Mark's motivations were purely financial. Could a man who truly loved her and their unborn child have gotten them into such a predicament to begin with? Still, she wanted to believe in redemption. If Mark could truly sever ties with Lillian, perhaps they could rebuild, albeit slowly and painfully. She recognized that forgiveness wouldn't come easily, but for the sake of their child, she was willing to try, provided Mark demonstrated genuine remorse and commitment. However, fate threw another curveball. On a humid afternoon, as Hannah tried to rest, she received a frantic call from an unknown number. When she answered, she heard a voice trembling with urgency, one of Mark's junior associates. Miss S. Henderson? Please, you have to come to Mark's office. Something bad has happened. Panic overtook her. She demanded an explanation, but the associate was too frazzled to provide details, only repeating that Mark needed her immediately. Ignoring the doctor's advice to stay calm, Hannah rushed out, hailing a taxi to Mark's corporate headquarters. Her mind spun with worst-case scenarios. Had Lillian made good on her threats? Had Mark's investors pulled out at the last minute, triggering a meltdown? Or worse, had Mark been hurt? When the taxi pulled up to the towering glass building, Hannah's anxiety soared. She hurried inside, ignoring the curious stares of employees who recognized her. She was directed to Mark's private office on the top floor, where she found him slumped in a chair, looking as if he hadn't slept in days. Papers were strewn across his desk, his hair disheveled and his normally confident demeanor replaced by a haunted expression. What happened? She asked, breathless. Are you okay? He glanced up, eyes brimming with relief at her presence. Hannah, he murmured. God, I'm sorry. Her gaze flicked to the documents scattered about. They appeared to be legal papers, statements of accounts, and a flurry of emails. What's going on? Mark rubbed his temples, exhaling a shaky breath. Lillian pulled out of the negotiations. She's threatening to expose everything. She has evidence, pictures, texts, bank transfers that could ruin my reputation and sabotage my deals. She's demanding double what we originally offered, plus a piece of future profits from my real estate ventures. Hannah's stomach churned. Why would she do that? Does she think you'll cave? His laughter was hollow. She knows I might. Too much is at stake, my business, the livelihoods of my employees, our future. If she goes public, I could lose hundreds of millions. The investors would pull out. The city commission might revoke my permits. Everything could collapse. Hannah felt her knees weaken. She rested a hand on Mark's desk to steady herself. So what are you going to do? He shook his head, despair etched across his face. I don't know. I've already offered more money than I ever imagined. She wants a piece of me forever, Hannah. She wants to be tethered to my success, to milk it for all it's worth. And if I don't comply, she'll drag my name through the mud. A tense silence filled the office. Hannah thought of the text message she had received from Lillian, the venomous threat hidden within. She realized, with growing dread, that this woman had meticulously planned every step, using Mark's vulnerabilities to ensnare him. Now, unless he agreed to her extortion, she would unleash havoc on his life. "What do you want me to do?" Hannah asked quietly. His eyes flickered with desperation. "I don't know. I need you. I need to know that, no matter what happens, you'll stand by me. I'm terrified of losing you." Hannah's heart squeezed at the genuine fear in his voice. Despite everything, she still loved him, still believed that the man she married was buried somewhere under these layers of mistakes. But trust was fragile, and his affair had shattered it. "We're not okay, Mark," she said, voice tinged with sorrow. "I can't promise that we will be. You betrayed me. You betrayed our child. The only reason I'm even here is because I hoped you could fix this before it destroys all of us." He looked like he wanted to reach for her, to hold her. She stiffened, unsure if she could accept the comfort of his touch. Instead, she turned away, her gaze falling on a framed photo of them from their wedding day, displayed on his desk. Their faces shone with happiness, the future bright and unblemished by deceit. She wondered if they could ever recapture even a fraction of that bliss. "Tell me what to do," he pleaded. "Should I pay her? Should I let it all come crashing down and start over?" She sighed, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the decision. "You can't let her own you forever, Mark. If you give in to her demands now, what's to stop her from asking for more later? But if you don't pay her, you risk everything. Either way, you need to make a choice. And you need to be ready to face the consequences." He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I'll talk to Robert again, see if there's a way to legally restrict her from making further claims after a settlement. Maybe we can salvage something." Hannah squeezed her eyes shut, trying to quell the wave of nausea and anxiety that threatened to overtake her. She felt a sudden, sharp twinge in her abdomen, a reminder of the physical toll this ordeal was taking. "I need to leave," she whispered. "I'm not feeling well." Mark shot up from his chair, concern etched across his face. "Are you okay? Let me drive you home." She shook her head. "No, I'll be fine. I just need rest. Sort this out, Mark, or we risk losing more than just money." With that, she turned and walked away, ignoring the worried stares of the staff. Outside, the late afternoon sun seemed too bright, the city too loud. She climbed into a waiting taxi and leaned back against the seat, cradling her belly. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she realized the grim reality. Even if Mark managed to extricate himself from Lillian's clutches, their marriage might never be the same. Back in his office, Mark sank into his chair, staring blankly at the legal papers. His phone rang investors, no doubt, or maybe Robert with updates. He let it go to voicemail. All he could think of was the look of pain in Hannah's eyes, a reflection of the turmoil he had brought into her life. Swallowing the lump in his throat, he resolved that he would do anything, pay any price to free himself from Lillian's grasp, if only to salvage a chance at redemption with his wife and unborn child. The question that lingered, however, was whether it was already too late. A week later, tensions reached a breaking point. Lillian's legal team issued an ultimatum: pay the inflated settlement or brace for a damaging public scandal. Mark, cornered, agreed to the payout, but he demanded a strict non-disclosure agreement that prohibited Lillian from demanding more money or revealing their affair in any form. Stung by the threat of potential lawsuits, she finally relented. The transaction was swift and brutal. In a single wire transfer, Mark forfeited a hefty portion of his fortune, effectively buying back his freedom. Investors were kept in the dark, about the true reason behind the large withdrawal, believing instead that it was tied to strategic real estate moves. Robert Calhoun ensured that every legal document was airtight, leaving Lillian with no further leverage. With the crisis contained, Mark approached Hannah with a mixture of relief and dread. She listened to his confession about the settlement, her expression weary. Though she was glad the immediate threat had passed, her trust remained shattered. Healing would require time, therapy, and a deep recommitment to their vows. Days before their son's birth, Mark moved back into the Los Feliz home. Hannah allowed him a corner of the guest room, uncertain if she could share a marital bed with him yet. He spent every spare moment caring for her, driving her to doctor's appointments, and even painting the nursery walls a soft shade of blue. Little by little, he tried to show her through actions rather than empty promises that he was ready to change. When labor pains finally came, Mark stood by Hannah's side, holding her hand through every contraction. Their son, whom they named Lucas Morgan Henderson, arrived healthy and wailing. In that moment, as tears of joy and relief coursed down their cheeks, Mark and Hannah shared a fleeting sense of unity. They were parents now, bound by a love far greater than themselves. In the weeks that followed, Mark continued to prove his devotion. Late-night feedings, diaper changes, lullabies, he embraced these tasks without complaint. Hannah, emotionally and physically exhausted, found solace in his consistency. Though the wounds of betrayal hadn't fully healed, the presence of their newborn son served as a reminder of what they stood to gain by forging a new path together. Slowly, they agreed to couples therapy, determined to confront the ugliness of the past and rebuild on a foundation of honesty. Mark cut all remaining ties with Lillian, focusing instead on repairing the damage within his own home. As the months passed, Hannah saw glimpses of the man she once fell in love with, driven yet humble, proud yet willing to admit his faults. Their marriage remained a work in progress. Nightmares of Lillian's threats still haunted Hannah, and Mark wrestled with guilt over his failures. But through it all, they leaned on each other, fueled by the tiny heartbeat that had come into their lives and demanded they fight for a better tomorrow. And for now, that was enough. Surviving heartbreak and betrayal is never simple. Yet Mark and Hannah's story reminds us that even the deepest wounds can begin to heal when both parties commit to rebuilding trust. If you found yourself moved by their tumultuous journey, consider how compassion and genuine accountability can transform relationships hanging by a thread. Real-life stories like this underscore the complexity of human choices and the price we pay for them. We invite you to reflect on this dramatic tale. Could you forgive such a betrayal? What sacrifices would you make for the people you love most? Let us know your thoughts below. And if you want more narratives that pull back the curtain on life's most challenging moments, be sure to like this video, share it with friends who love drama, and subscribe to our channel. Your support empowers us to continue exploring stories that captivate, inspire, and teach hard-won lessons.